All right, welcome back to the interactive media series. We are talking about design sprints today, and specifically the very last day of your 5-day sprint. And of course, our 5-day sprint has been much longer than 5 days, only because we're only meeting a couple times a week, and that you're working with your group in between them. So let's go ahead and get started with our final day of our design sprint. For our very last session, we ended off with the responsibility being handed off to the team to create the actual design prototype. And you've probably put a ton of time into this, which is great. You've probably already had an opportunity to test it and make sure it works on the right devices. So if it's a mobile app, you've tested it on Android phones and iPhones. If it's a desktop, you've tested it on PCs and Macs, and it's ready to go, and it looks cohesive. All the text is written out, there's no lorem ipsums, and all the images don't have watermarks. So this product is ready to go. So today, the very last day, we focus mostly on usability testing and product validation. So let's go into just some quick details on what usability testing is. We actually have a series of lectures on design research and usability studies and competitive analysis, and that will fall into that. But in order for you to do the work that you need to do today, I will tell you just enough about it to make you dangerous. So what is usability testing? So it essentially helps us understand if something is usable or not, and to what degree. So usability testing is a great method for uncovering points of failure in your product. So let's take, for instance, this water bottle, for example. How easy is it for me to drink water from this bottle? How easy is it for me to essentially open the top of it or just figure it out without directions? This is a blender bottle, so it's got this little like spiral thing. You can't see it because it's not clear. There's a little spiral blender in it. How easy is it for me to mix a protein shake with this blender bottle, etc. So a usability study only focuses on what works and what doesn't work, and potentially to what degree. So like, how bad is something? However, we're only talking to a small group of people, so we won't be able to scale this out statistically to be statistically significant, meaning we can't make a generalization that 80% of the population is going to experience this because 80% of the people that you tested did. We just simply don't have enough data and not enough participants. With the usability study, it's also a way for us to better understand the ease of use or how difficult it is to use your product. And the way that we do that is by having them perform very specific tasks. So earlier in our design sprint, you actually had conducted a task analysis, or some of you did, in terms of giving someone a prompt and then observing them going through another app or another website experience. So what you want to do is that, essentially, for the product that your team has designed. So in order to do that, we need to first ask the right questions so that we get the answers we need to move forward with our design work. After we observe the behaviors as a group, we can then analyze the data together and come up with a set of recommendations and solutions. Your usability study can actually be done both in person and online. We are actually going to focus more on the in-person usability testing, especially when we're doing it in class. If you're doing this remotely, meaning you're conducting them online, you can still certainly send someone a prototype link, give them a prompt, but then you need them to actually do the recording and for you to be able to see it. There is software that exists for it. We will be actually using it more in depth later. In the meantime, I think it's more important for you to get in-person experience doing this exercise than trying to do it remotely. Your usability test session can also be moderated, meaning it's kind of this live conversation. You ask questions, they answer it, etc. Or you can also conduct it one way, meaning you can email someone the prompt and a link to your prototype, and then have them respond to you back with answers to your questions. However, one of the most valuable things about usability testing is the ability to actually have a conversation with someone and to observe them while they go through this experience. So being able to see their faces, read their body language, also read like the inflections and tones in their voice, becomes a lot more valuable to you than just getting an email back with a couple of answers to your questions, which ends up reading like a survey. With your usability studies, you should also record your data. So it's really difficult for you to be the person facilitating the study and for you to watch and look out for everything. So you may need to do a video recording or an audio recording, take pictures, and or have a dedicated note taker with you. And that person can also help you analyze your data after all your sessions are completed. Now, the core question of usability studies, and the main thing that we always want to answer with a study like this, is does your product deliver upon its core promise? So in this case, for your design sprint project, it is your job to make sure that a group of people can place a food order before they are hungry or hangry. So did the things that you've designed, do they deliver on that promise? That is the key question that we need answered in this usability study, but it's obviously not a question that we can just ask the testers. We need to actually kind of create a set of questions that are appropriate for them to walk through a task and to be able to give you information based on their experience. So let's go ahead and get started with writing a usability study. Later on, of course, we get into a lot more detail about the right way to ask questions, a good way to format them, ways to scale, but today we're going to focus on just doing something really quick just to prepare for this next hour or so worth of research sessions. So when you start writing usability tests, when you run a study, you always want to actually prepare these ahead of time. So unlike our generative research interviews that we did early on, they were completely open-ended. You had a prompt and you kind of riffed from there. For a usability study, you actually need to plan everything out ahead of time so that you get your you get your questions answered rather, and you know exactly what it is you're looking for even before you start asking people to walk through your prototype. It allows you to be more prepared and to make the best use of your time with these people. Make sure you pilot your test, meaning you test your test prior to conducting it on like 5 or 6 people. Start off with one person first, someone that's not familiar with the project. That'll give you an idea of what types of questions didn't work or issues with the prototype that need to be addressed before actually going out and talking to a larger group of people. It'll save you a lot of time in the long run, and your data will be a lot cleaner that way. When you work on your questions, both writing them and articulating them to somebody, make sure you don't ask leading questions. So a leading question is when you phrase a question a certain way that leads them to answer a certain way. So an example of a leading question would be, don't you think this color black is just such an awful color for a water bottle? So that would be an example of a leading question because of the way that I've asked my question, the way that I looked at something, the way I've already biased my question with an answer. That is actually what you want to avoid. So keep your questions as neutral as possible. Always put it on the participant to give you an answer or a reaction. You are always going to be the neutral party, even if you feel very strongly or a certain way about the product that you're working on. The next thing with preparing your usability study up front is that it helps you determine the purpose of the study before you start answering the questions, and allows you to refer to these bigger questions as you actually write the individual questions. So this is a great time to circle back with your team, make sure that everyone is aligned on what you specifically want to learn and the types of questions and tasks you want to put in front of your tester. And above all else, try your best not to ask any yes or no questions. They tend to just abruptly end a conversation, and it's hard to get people to start talking from there. So wherever you can, ask them to share their thoughts, tell you what they're seeing, and kind of explain their perspective on the interactions that they're kind of dealing with. So here is a loose format of how you can organize your notes and your questions. You certainly don't have to use it, but this is just an example. So it helps you kind of break down what you want to learn, and then from there, what kind of tasks do you need them to complete in order to learn what it is you want to learn? And then from there, any results that you notice between participants. So maybe participant 1 signed in first before calling a ride, if you were designing for Lyft, for example. Or like number 2, maybe for a Domino's example, some customers would place a pizza order first and then add dessert. Or maybe you have other customers who use a coupon first and then add a pizza to their order and add dessert. So make sure you kind of structure your data collection sheet, which is what this is, in a way that makes it easy for you to log your answers, but also remind you to hit all of your questions as well. So now we're going to actually have the more fun, exciting session, and that's actually conducting your user tests. So go ahead and let's break into your groups. Remember that there is one person who is facilitating the session, so that person's asking the questions. There is a dedicated note taker to also help record the sessions. Anyone else who isn't actively participating in a research study will either be observing their group or taking notes for another. So make sure that the people you bring in to test your prototype have not worked on your project before and essentially know as little about it as possible. That way there isn't kind of this bias of information and a slant on the perspectives when they're sharing it. So make sure you find someone on a different team, have them be the person to test your work, and then there's only one facilitator that's asking the questions, and then other people are note takers or recorders in the session. So now that you've conducted your usability studies, let's go ahead and see what everyone learned, and let's think back to our design process we've done these 5 really intensive days and see where we've landed with that and if we were a success. So for our retrospective, I want to better understand if your project landed in one of these 3 buckets. So there are some projects that end up as what we call like an efficient failure, meaning that your design didn't quite hit the mark, meaning it didn't check all the boxes, wasn't the most amazing thing ever. People weren't able to buy like $3,000 worth of pizza in 20 seconds, but you learned a lot of things that will help you design a better product. So that would be an efficient failure. The next bucket would be a flawed success. So you met some, but not all, of the customer needs that you had outlined early on, and it would be worth continuing work on it in another design sprint, or just kind of working on it as a normal project. And then we have last one, which is an epic win, meaning that you met all of your customer needs, they can do everything really easily, they were engaged with all the content that was on screen, and that you could actually just ship it in the marketplace today. So you can launch the website or you can send it out to the Apple Store. So I'd love to see where your project fell. So if you had any of these things though, I want to make it clear, your sprint was a raging success. So it doesn't matter, I'm going to go back here, it doesn't matter if it was an efficient failure or a flawed success or an epic win. In this case, everybody learned something worthwhile that they're going to be able to apply to future projects or to a future sprint. And now that you've been through a design sprint, you can most likely conduct another one exactly like this. And there's a lot of different formats that you can follow. I believe the Google Ventures website has a section for design sprints, and you should definitely do more research. They have like 1-day models, 3-day models, and this 5-day model, depending on how many people you have available and the type of problem that you want to solve. And as you think back to your project and your process, especially when you're putting together your case study, I want you to focus on a couple of other things too. So what was your biggest takeaway from the project? Could be technical skill set, it could be your soft skills, so interviewing people or working with a team, etc. What did you find most challenging about the project? Was it relationships, or was it the timeline, or was it the fact we moved really fast, or anything else? And then lastly, what are you most proud of? Because you've done some amazing work over 5 days. Certainly there's something in there in those long toiled hours that you have a lot of pride in. So make sure you mention that as well. So overall, great work. Design sprints are very emotionally, physically, and mentally draining. But all of these ideas seem like they're going to knock it out of the park with the right level of thought and detail and attention. So overall, really good job on all of your work. Make sure you work on your sprint case study and start loading in all the information so that you can actually submit it, and it ends up being a really cohesive and a very nice polished piece for your portfolio.